Alright, we're going to go ahead and go to part 3 on the back, the solving. So I'm going to start with number 16. We have the cube root of 5 plus 8x equals negative 3. Now the whole goal, guys, when solving for the cube root is you want to isolate the cube root majority of the time. Sometimes it's a little bit hard. But for this case, you want to make sure it's by itself, and we're good here. So once you have the cube root by itself, how you get rid of a cube root is you cube both sides. Just like when you had the square root of x, we squared both sides to get rid of it, and it canceled. Right? There's actually a 2 right here. You just don't see it. It's an understood 2, and they cancel. So the same thing here. When you take the cube of a cube root function, it cancels. So you get whatever's left on the inside on the left, and then negative 3 cubed is going to give me a negative 27. Because negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, and positive 9 times negative 3 gives me negative 27. And then I'm going to go ahead and simplify. So solve for x, subtract 5 from both sides. I get 8x equals negative 32. And then divide both sides by 8. So x equals 4, negative 4. And then that is my answer. And I can always check, guys. It's always a good idea to check. Plug it back into the original function for x, just to double check to make sure we did it right. Just like that. So I'm going to simplify this guy underneath. PEMDAS, so 8 times 4 is negative 32. And then 5 minus 32 is the cube root of negative 27. And then the cube root of negative 27 is negative 3, so it works out. It checks. So that's number 16. Let's go ahead and go to number 17. So number 17, we have 1/2 times the cube root of 6 minus 3x minus 4 equals negative 1. Move my paper up a little bit. Okay, so for this one, we want to get the cube root by itself. This means times. So the first thing I'm going to do to isolate the cube root is I'm going to get rid of this 4. So I need to add 4. Order matters, so be careful. So I have 1/2 cube root of 6 minus 3x equals 4 minus 1 is positive 3. And then some of you guys might want to, we're multiplying, and some of you guys might want to think, oh, I'm just going to divide by 1/2. But that makes it a little bit more tricky. Whenever you have a fraction and we want to get rid of it, it's best to multiply by its reciprocal. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply this by 2 over 1, because 2 times 1 is 2, 1 times 2 is 2, and 2 over 2 cancels to be 1. So these cross cancel and they go away. But what I do to one side, I do to the other, and I'm going to write this 3 as 3 over 1 just to make sure I align everything. Because when you're adding, or sorry, excuse me, when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply the top with the top and the bottom with the bottom. So on the left side, I have the cube root of 6 minus 3x, and then 3 times 2 is 6. 6 over 1 is still 6, so it looks a little bit neater. Now to get rid of the cube root, now that it's isolated by itself, I'm going to cube both sides. So I get 6 minus 3x on the left, and then 6 cubed, I have 6 times 6 is 36, and then 36 times 6, 6 times 6 is 36, 6 times 3 is 18, plus 3 is 19, 20, 21. So 216 is my answer for right there. And now it's simple algebra. I'm going to solve for x. So this cancels. So I get negative 3x equals 216 minus 6 gives me 210. Divided by negative 3. That cancels right here. So x equals, now 3 goes into 21 7 times. So 7, right, 21 divided by negative 3 is negative 7, and then you have a 0, so it's 10. So stick on the 0 right there. So negative 70 times negative 3 will give you positive 210. Now always, 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 let's check our answer just to double check to make sure we did this correctly. We have 1/2 times the cube root of 6 minus 3 times negative 70 minus 4 equals, does that equal negative 1? You have to check if it does, because I'm plugging it back to the original. I'm going to show you guys how to plug this in your calculator just to kind of review. When I'm doing this, be very careful when you're plugging in. My calculator is a little bit older, so I have to make sure I really pay attention to parentheses. So I'm going to put the 1/2 in parentheses. And then to get the cube root button, you're going to go to the math button right here. Press your math button, and if you go down to number 4, that's where your cube root function is located. Now it has an open parentheses. That means I need to close my parentheses when I'm done plugging in a number. So I have 6 minus 3, and then I want to type in negative 70. So I have another open parentheses, negative 70. So now I have 2 open parentheses, right? So I'm going to close the negative 70 right here, but then I need to close another parentheses again because this second parentheses will go ahead and close off what's underneath the radical, the cube root part. Because I want to make sure the negative 4 is still on the outside. So I'm going to do minus 4. Once I hit my answer, I should get negative 1, and I do, so that means I did this problem correctly, and there's a check. Awesome. Alright, so the last one I'm going to do for this problem is number 18 on your review. Number 18 says you have 2 times 2x to the 1/3 power plus 1 equals 5. Now for number 18, guys, whenever you have the 1/3 right here, it's the same thing that we talked about last unit. If I have x to the 1/2, I can rewrite that as a square root of x, right? Because there's an understood 2 here that we just don't write. Mathematicians, it's understood right here. We know that there's a 2 here. So if I had to the 1/3 power, it's only the part that's in the parentheses. So if I have something to the 1/3 power, I can rewrite that as the cube root of whatever is being raised to the 1/3 power. So for this guy right here, this is going to be the cube root of 2x. And it's only the part that's in the parentheses and still being multiplied by 2. Bring down your plus 1 equals 5. So we want to solve, and I want to get the cube root by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 1 from both sides. So I get 2 times the cube root of 2x equals 5 minus 1 is 4. This is being multiplied right here, so I want to get the cube root by itself. Divide both sides by 2. So I have the cube root of 2x equals 2. And then to get rid of a cube root, I'm going to cube both sides. So I have 2x equals 2 cubed is 8. And last but not least, I'm going to divide both sides by 2, so x equals 4. Now always, 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 even me as a math teacher, sometimes I make mistakes. So you always want to check your answer. Let's plug this into the original function. We want to check, does that equal 5? So 4 times 2 is 8. So it's 8 raised to the 1/3 power. We're still checking, does that equal 5? And then this is the cube root of 8, right, if we rewrite. Now what is the cube root of 8? What times what gives me 8? That is 2. Still checking if it gives me 5. 2 times 2 is 4. And does 4 plus 1 give us 5? Yes. So we did the problem correctly.